Philippe Tailliez was a friend and colleague of Jacques Cousteau. He was an underwater pioneer who had been diving since the 1930s. Biography. He was the younger son of Philippe Tailliez, a career sailor then in station in Tahiti, told in his letters the stories of pearl divers, which fascinated Philippe. Philippe Tailliez left the Naval College in 1924, was affected in Toulon. He became a career naval officer. He became passionate about underwater breath-holding, hunting and photography, and became the French Navy's swimming champion. Inspired by the philosophy of the Swiss naturalist Jacques Cousteau, whom he met in Carqueiranne where he lived, of gardening and underwater fishing, he already took heed of the fragility of the sea. The fertile coastal belt, rich in colors and in fish, he wrote in 1937, is not broader than a river. Officer on the destroyer Condorcet, Tailliez made the acquaintance of a young ensign of the vessel with whom he later discovered diving and nature, the gunner Jacques Cousteau. In 1936 he introduced Cousteau, while both were officers on the Condorcet, to the sport of spearfishing, and 2 years later to Frédéric Dumas, another diving companion. These three men would start the history of deep-sea diving. Passionate about cinema and owner of a camera, Cousteau dreamed of making underwater films at once, but for lack of time the dream spent several years to be carried out, and the German Hans Haas made the first underwater film in the Antilles in 1939. Tailliez acquired a passion for freediving and underwater photography. In the summer and autumn of 1943, he aided Cousteau in testing the prototype of the Aquarius, making about 500 dives, gradually going to deeper depths. These three divers would become known as the Three Musqueamers. The Second World War separated the team temporarily, and Tailliez in particular would take part at the time of the campaign in Syria, with naval action against the Vichy Navy. On armistice leave and thus having time, in 1942 they made without breathing apparatus the first French underwater film, Par d'Exhuit Meters de Fond, and the next year Epaves, this time with the Cousteau-Gagnon Aquarius, and with the funds of the Marseille Company of Reinflation, Marcellin. In the wartime shortages, to get movie film to make Epaves, Cousteau had to buy up hundreds of unexposed short small-gauge films intended for children's toy cameras, and splice them end-to-end into movie-length reels. In 1945, the Gaullist Admiral Lemonnier, having viewed this film, entrusted to Tailliez the direction of the GRS, and is now CEPHISMER, Cellule Plan et Humaine Intervention sous la mer. He had Cousteau and Dumas assigned there, and obtained a ship, the sloop Hermellin. Admiral Lemonnier appointed him as the first commanding officer of the Hermellin, with which the three made innumerable missions of mine clearance, underwater exploration, physiological tests, of underwater archaeology, and of supporting the first bathyspheres of Professor Jacques Piccard, the FNRS-2, in 1949 in Dakar. At the same time they started their underwater exploration and archaeological finds off the coast of Mahdia, Tunisia. They did physiological tests, discovering the principle of diving tables. In 1949 they helped Jacques Piccard off the coast of Dakar with his prototype of the bathysphere. Tailliez has described these adventures in his book Plan et Sans Cable. These adventures are told in the book of Philippe Tailliez, Plan et Sans Cable, and in the book of James Duggan, Frédéric Dumas and Jacques Cousteau, Le Monde du Silence. In 1949, Philippe Tailliez was sent to French Indochina, where he was involved in combat diving during the anti-colonial rebellion there, leaving the direction of the GRS to Cousteau and Jean Alenat. On his return to France, Tailliez began, together with Hans Sellner, the development of the Aquarius, a new type of bathysphere scaphi that used liquid air to float. The previous batch of scaphi used a big bag full of petrol as a float. Through lack of financial support, they could not make it technically perfect and the prototype sank during the first test. On the 20th of January 1955 he was designated commander of the Northern Rhine Flotilla and of the building base, the Vosges, at Koblenz-Bingen in Germany, and took its command with the center of the maritime forces of the Rhine on April 24. President Nasser's plan to nationalize the Suez Canal in 1956 involved the Franco-English reaction of November 1956, marked Commander Tailliez deeply. He was also responsible for a part of a crawling channel of life, the Rhine, an artery essential for the economic welfare of his residents whose traffic is equivalent to that of Suez Canal, 100 million tons. He was joined soon by the leading seaman Tailliez, who had been, in the Far East, one of the most solid monitors of his section of underwater intervention. Tailliez arrived to form, then to direct, the underwater intervention group, which obviously was lacking with the flotilla. The binomial ties Tailliez carried out 222 April 1956, the first dive in the pit of the Narrows of Bingen Loch, the deepest place in the Rhine. Tailliez told about this dive in an article of the Maritime Review Special Number 172 of Christmas 1960, entitled Dive in the Lorelei. On the 1st of August 1956, he left this command to join a new assignment close to the diving at the edges of the Mediterranean. At the same time he conducted several underwater archaeological explorations. In 1960 he retired from the French Navy. From then on he devoted himself to the protection of the sea from environmental pollution. In 1964 he was a founding member of the scientific committee of the Port Cross National Park. In 1982 he became the president of the GRAN. He was, from 1960 to 1963, the president of the Technical Commission of the Fédération Française d'études et de sports sous-marins. He was also one of the founding members of the Confédération mondiale des activités subaquatiques. Philippe Tailliez is considered as one of the fathers of modern deep-sea diving. He inspired Cousteau to his environmental consciousness. He was given many awards in France and abroad for his multiple contributions. From 1960 to 1963 Philippe Tailliez was president of the National Technical Commission of the FFESSM and one of the founder members of the CMAS. He was at the same time in underwater archaeology and led many sites with the assistance of the Management of Underwater Archaeological Research and Navy. He chaired, as of his creation, the GRAN. After 1960, date of his retirement from the Navy, he was devoted to marine environmental protection, keeping away from the media. Contrary to Cousteau, he was nevertheless very active. Founder member of the Scientific Committee of the National Park of Port Cross, created in 1964, and of the Paul Ricard Oceanographical Institute. He helped and advised with a constant generosity of many impassioned explorations, cinema and sea, of which some became famous. Considered the modern father of deep-sea diving and the inspirer of the environmental conscience of Cousteau, Philippe Tailliez received many distinctions, in France and abroad, for his many contributions. Movies. In 1943, he was awarded, with Cousteau and Dumas, the first prize ex-aequo on the Congrès du Film Documentaire for the first French underwater film Par d'X-Huit Meters de Fond. Shot the year before, he was awarded, again together with Cousteau and Dumas, the CIDLC Prize at the 1946 Cannes Film Festival for the film Épave. Bibliography. Books in French about Philippe Tailliez. Philippe Tailliez, Le Père de la Plongée. Patrick Mouton, Glenat, 1993. Philippe Tailliez, Pionnier de la Plongée. Les Cahiers d'Océanorama, Inst. P. Ricard, 1995. He was the author of several books, in French. Le Plongée and Scaphandre. Co-authors: P.H. Tailliez, F. Dumas, J.Y. Cousteau, J. Alanat, F. de Villa, ed. Elsevier, 1949. First manual dedicated to diving in an atmospheric diving suit. Le Plongée. Co-authors: P.H. Tailliez, F. Dumas, J.Y. Cousteau, J. Alanat, F. de Villa, ed. Arthur, 1955. Reissues in 1960 and 1967. Plongées sans cables. Philippe Tailliez, ed. Arthur, 1954. Pre-Nautilus. Nouvelles Plongées sans cables, ed. Arthur, 1960. Aquarius. Philippe Tailliez, ed. France Empire, 1961. Prix de l'Académie de Marine. Nouvelles Plongées sans cables, ed. Arthur, 1967. Plongées sans cables, ed. Sud, 1998. In English. The Hidden Depths, E.P. Dutton and Amp Company, Inc., New York, 1954. The Complete Manual of Free Diving, Putnam, 1957.